Here are some ideas that any business owner can use to double their bottom line profit. And if you're an accountant, you could actually do this for your clients. And if you do this for your clients, they'd happily pay you much higher fees than they'll currently be happy to pay for year-end accounts and tax, etc. It all depends on just understanding a few key numbers and ideas. So the first thing is that your gross margin is made up of the difference between your price and the cost of goods sold, which is the direct cost of whatever it is you're selling, goods or service, whether the cost to make them or to buy them or to provide them. Now, if you take the difference between those and divide it by the sales price times 100, you get what's called the gross margin. Once you know your gross margin, you then need to know your sales amount. And the sales amount is basically made up of how many customers you've got or clients, how often they buy from you, typically in a year, and what the price is that they pay you each time they buy. So if you work those three numbers out, that tells you your sales. And once you know your gross margin times your sales, that will then tell you your gross profit. And then you simply take off your overheads to get to your net bottom line profit. Now, I'm not even going to worry about how you can improve your cost of goods sold or your overheads. I mean, I'm sure it can be done, but obviously times are difficult. There are other people better qualified than me to look at your costs and see if you can reduce them. But you don't even need to look at that in order to make a huge improvement to your bottom line profit. You simply need to focus on what you can control, which is the average price that you charge for what you sell, the frequency with which you get people to buy from you, your existing customers to buy, and also the number of customers. Now, looking at each of those individually, the average price you charge, you could put your prices up, and you probably should, but you could also do things like segment your customer or client bank and have different levels of service or product, different quality, different packages, different bundles that you identify that each of them might be willing to pay for. And what you'll find is a large proportion of typically customers or clients for any business will happily pay more than the market going price if they perceive that they're getting extra value. So there's lots of scope for increasing your average price. Now, let's be really conservative, and let's just say we could increase that by 10%. So I'll come back to that number. Similarly, with the number of customers. Now, you could go out and generate more leads, obviously, but you could also do things like improve how good you are at tracking what's known as the buyer's journey. And the buyer's journey is basically from when someone may be vaguely interested in what you have to sell, but they haven't decided to buy yet, all the way through to when they become now buyers. And if you nurture them along that journey by giving them information as to why they might be interested in what you are providing and why they might actually see you as the right person to buy from, then you'll find that a higher proportion at the end will buy from you than would otherwise have been the case. Now, bear in mind that typically out of 100 potential customers for any goods or service, only 3%, 1 to 3% actually, are actually what are called now buyers, ready to buy immediately. So if you can get them further back in the buyer's journey and nurture them along, you can get a much higher proportion of the 3% to come to you than to go elsewhere. It's all about having a proper sales, a follow-up process, a lead generation follow-up process, called a funnel or a sales ladder, various terms. But basically what you need is a system that you've identified to provide information along the way and nurture these customers or clients to become interested in buying from you at the end of the journey. So there's ways of improving that. You could also actually reduce your customer or client attrition rate by simply having better communication with them and by maybe having regular offers. It's been found that the vast majority of customers who go elsewhere don't go because they're dissatisfied with something you've done for them. They just go because they feel as if they haven't had that much attention, that much interest, and they're just attracted by someone else. So nurturing your existing customers and your prospective customers can have a huge difference on the number of customers. And we're only looking again for a 10% increase. You could probably achieve that by getting fewer to leave you each year. And similarly, there's a frequency with which they buy. Now, you can do that in a lot of ways. You can actually have what's called a cross-sell, which means they buy different things from you when they buy. So that effectively increases the number of purchases. You could have regular offers. You could just provide a wider range or a more exciting range of services. So, for instance, as an accountant, instead of just doing the bookkeeping and the accounts, the year-end accounts and tax, you might be able to offer them business growth advice, i.e. something like this. and they'll come to you more often because they'll be buying from you more frequently and buying a wider range of services. Now, the difference that can make is astonishing. So here we have a starting position where our price is 100, and we've got 500 customers, and they buy typically twice a year from us. That would mean our revenue would be 100,000. Our gross margin is 40%, so and our overheads are 20,000. So our net profit ends up at being 20,000, because 40% of 100,000, our gross profit is 40,000. If we could make these 10% increases here, where we got our average price up to 110, we got the customers up to 550, 10% more, and we got them to buy slightly more frequently, 10%, 2.2 times a year on average instead of 2. What you'll find is that your revenue goes up here by 30%, which is typically 33%. That would probably be a sort of typical figure for a lot of businesses. Your gross margin will automatically go up because you've increased your average price and your costs haven't changed. So your gross margin would go up in this instance to 45%. Your overheads haven't changed. And what you'll find is that your gross profit has trebled from, I've cocked that up. Right. Okay. I might have to do this again, but basically your overheads are still 20,000. Your gross profit goes up from 40,000 to 60,000, and your net profit goes up from 20,000 to 40,000. So it doubles. So basically this works for any business. But you might find I'll come back on again later, having changed that number there, and do this again. Thanks very much for watching. Cheers.